Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Sirius. This is my brother Philip Sirius with the Real Estate Brothers. Please subscribe, tweet, Facebook, all Instagram,
We're obligated
Pinterest,
to say that legally, I
all
think.
of them. Please. We are going in our deep dive in property management, and this time we are going in on screening. And screening it's one of those things that everybody was like, you got to screen, you got to screen, you got to screen. Screening is super important, but we like to think of it as sort of this there's the good and there's the bad, right? But it's really more of a spectrum, and you've got to find the people that are in this area, and then you have that fair housing, and I didn't center that well, but they're looking over all of it, so you have to be careful and make sure you're not discriminating, you're not treating different people differently, and while in some cases that's easy, eviction history, that's simple. It's not as simple when it comes to mashing. You got credit scores, you got evictions, you got late pays, you got all these different things.
Histories.
So it can get a little tricky. There's some obvious ones, very clear. You have to stay in it. There's some that's a little give and take. But if you don't screen, or if you screen badly, we have seen it over and over again. Every real estate investor I know, everyone you know, I presume, has a horror story. They all started screening too little. We've had ones we put in early on. We had a eviction. Basically, our criteria is you couldn't have an eviction in the last 2 years, I believe. How many evictions did that one lady have?
Oh, they had, I think, like 25% of their portfolios being evicted all at once, and so it was pretty.
Well, I was talking that one lady at our apartment who got approved because our property.
The one resident.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
It's like 11 evictions,
yeah.
And shockingly, she stopped paying her rent very soon after she moved in. I'm actually not sure she even got a single month. We've seen that. Entire buildings can fall apart. I mean, people think in these terms of like 10% off, 20% off of their projections. Projections can often be 100, 200% off. There are also, that just happens with rehab, but it also happens with operating a property. And the way to get these huge costs, and bad residents can put in horrible costs, not just in lost rent, but in maintenance issues, in driving away other good residents, and in huge turnovers. We had one poorly screened tenant steal a toilet.
That was really weird.
Yeah, just walked in and there was no toilet. Like, I get the appliances, I get the other things, but the toilet's not so much. So, I mean, we've had apartments linked. Like, we had one apartment that we bought it. It wasn't a good deal. It was 29 units. We had to pretty much empty the building over a long period of time, and we released it again, and our criteria still wasn't good enough, and we basically had to do it again.
Do a new reposition on it.
And those, shockingly, you're going to be shocked to this, that's expensive. It's expensive to do.
Yeah, evictions themselves are expensive, let alone all the extra costs that go with them.
Yeah, so
the most important thing, you got to understand some basics with fair housing before you do. This is the most important. Fair housing revolves around all of property management, but this is the part where it really matters the most. So you need to understand the basics. We're not going to go over that in depth in this situation. Basically, have criteria.
Yeah, 2 points. One, talk to an attorney, and two, we are not attorneys, so you need to talk to an attorney to verify. But there are some simple things that you just need to know.
Treat everybody the same. Don't be lame and start discriminating is the point of it. But understand that this is the part where it matters.
And you can unintentionally discriminate. If you let in somebody who has an eviction because they seem like a really nice person and they're well dressed or whatever, and the next person you don't let in because they seem like they're still kind of in this area, they're going to do it again. Just your feeling. You might not be intentionally discriminating against anybody, any class, any race, any sex, any group, anything, but you can still get busted for that because you're treating different groups, different people.
And you have to be able to prove that you are treating everybody the same. And the best way to do that is to stick to factual-based things that you can show. And so there's 5 criteria I say are basically fact-based in terms of their background that you're checking. There is civil history, which would generally be evictions and things of that nature. There is criminal history, misdemeanors, felonies, even you can find speeding tickets sometimes on that kind of things. There is rental history, getting a landlord reference of some kind. There is employment history, which is, have they been employed for a significant amount of time? What kind of money are they making? Are they making it regularly? And the last is credit history, which is basically how much you pay your bills and on time and things of that nature. These are the 5 things we look at. If you go beyond the scope, you really open yourself up into trouble with fair housing. Yeah. And so when we talk about the scale we had at the beginning again, there is the perfect resident who fits all of these magically, 100% perfectly, 850 credit score. They've been renting renting for 50 years. They make $1 million a year. They're going to be right up here at the very top. The
Does
best
this
renter
person
ever.
actually exist?
There's probably one of them. But they're not probably going to rent your house, and if you wait for that perfect resident, you're going to be vacant forever. Now, there's also this side where they have the absolute worst criminal, or the worst history of everything with criminal history. They have gotten evicted a bunch of times. They have a 350s at the bottom.
One time we offered, it was as a marketing gimmick, no application fees, and I don't recommend that. Partially because it costs money to run a background check, but also because when you have no application fees, people who know they're going to get probably rejected are likely to apply. We got tons of applications.
Yeah.
And I have never seen 5 evictions and 7 misdemeanors and a felony, and just over and over and over again. So yeah, there's some, unfortunately, and it's a tragedy in society, but it is a problem. As if you're trying to be a successful property owner, you have to be diligent in this regard.
And think of this again as a scale. Like, there's a chance that this person on the very bottom end will be a great resident, has reformed their life in some ways, is paying their bills. There is a chance that's going to happen, but the chances are very low compared to someone on the high side. So you need to figure out where you want to fit, what are the risks you're willing to take in terms of what you accept and what you don't accept. And I'm going to accept people who are at this line, and I'm willing to take on this amount of risk, because every resident has risk. And there's a chance every resident will work out great, but you want to kind of protect yourselves from the worst possible situations. You want to generally be on the right side of who works out as a resident going forward and things like that.
I would say there's 2 basic things. The first thing is the steps, and this you got to run the background check. So let's put that here, background check. My writing's getting bad. Background check. You need to call the employer. And you need to call the landlord. So you don't necessarily, you can find run a background check with a certified with a well-established screening company. They'll give you the criminal and civil history and a credit history as well. The employer, you want to there are some that call and let you know, but you need to call and make sure they have about 12 months of consistent employment, maybe 24 depending on your criteria. And you need to call the landlord, and you're not just looking whether or not they got evicted or they destroyed the place, but also whether or not how many late pays they had and that kind of thing.
Any complaints against them and stuff like that. So when it comes to civil history with evictions, I would say generally don't allow those.
Yeah. Well, it's a hard and soft criteria. So you want to get
on the civil history, the hard stuff is if they have an eviction on the file, that's a hard thing. Generally, I would say the recommendation is no evictions on the record, or no evictions within so long of a period of time. Backgrounds generally only go back 7 years legally, so that's as far as you can find.
Yeah, usually our hard criteria is no evictions in the last 7 years.
Criminal history, it could be same with, you could say no felonies, you could say no violent felonies. You could have misdemeanors be more of that soft thing you say, where, if there is a misdemeanor, you're willing to allow that. But if they have 2 misdemeanors, that turns into something that's, you could kind of make that. But you need to define that clearly. You can't say, well, this person has 3, but they're great everywhere else. You need to really be able to define.
You're looking at all these things, and they don't fit. There's no algorithm to make it perfect. But you need to have as specific and predetermined criteria as possible. So, like, if they have everything is terrible, but they have a bad credit score, and maybe that's good, but you have to have why does that fit into your criteria? So, credit score could be sort of like both a hard, if it's below 450, it's off. If it's below 600, then if there's another issue, say they have a misdemeanor or something like that, then it's off. So you want to create there's hards like no evictions in the last 7 years, no violent felonies ever. There's or something like that. I mean, maybe no violent felonies in the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But then there's also soft criteria when you get into whether or not your credit, not a good credit score is made up by great rental history, good employment, good income, things like that. And of course, we didn't mention you should have a multiple. The income should be a multiple of the rent, the minimum of 3 times is common in some higher priced markets like Manhattan or whatever. It's 2 or 2.5, but you should have that number there as well. And a lot of times you want to fudge it. A lot of times you want to push and they're so close. But
here's the time that I see gets fudged the most with specifically employment history or income verification. People will take under the table payments as verifying those kind of payments, or people who don't report their income or things like that. And this was the best example. Our company, we only take verified income. And during this whole coronavirus situation, I think that really saved us because, people who don't have verified income aren't in the same situation because if they're getting laid off and they're not verifying their income, they don't get unemployment.
Exactly.
So we were kind of saved in this global pandemic situation that happened because of the criteria we chose. And so we were better insulated against the risk because of the decision we made.
We had a little bit lower collections in April than we did in March. But there were horror stories like 1/3 of tenants not paying, and I don't see that anywhere. But at the same time, the ones who were strict on their criteria, looking for good residents, people who, if they got laid off or because of coronavirus, they can get unemployment insurance or could find another job or had savings or something. And we made some arrangements. We dropped late fees for people who had COVID issues, who could prove that. But at the same time, because of that, we survived very well. And I think the property managers who were pushing on their criteria, like, maybe they get some money on the table, it makes up for it. They're the ones getting hammered right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is a risk versus reward thing. And it's not,
we lost out on some good residents. I'm sure some good residents who were mad at us for not accepting them because they did get paid and stuff like that. We weren't able to lease our properties as quickly because we had to wait till someone had verified income. But now it's coming back and reaping the rewards of being that strict and waiting for that right resident for us.
Screening requires, I think, if anything, it's not even, we'll get into another episode on due diligence where it's all about just getting in the weeds of it. This isn't so much that. This is more being able to say no when you want to say yes. Because your criteria says, this is what I accept, this is what I need, this is an asset, you're protecting the value of that asset, and you've got to stick to that criteria, both in terms of staying within the law by treating everyone equal, but also in terms of protecting your own asset, not pushing, which is, in good times, you might get by. You won't get by if you just let anybody in. You'll get destroyed. Everybody does. Every investor always screens too little at the beginning. Everyone will sell up. Just ask them. But if you skirt a little bit in times like this, you're going to get hit hard. So be consistent, both to stay within the law and also to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And again, talk to a lawyer. We are not attorneys. Fair housing is serious, and you want to stay in compliance.
If you get this part right, you get 90% of property management right. Honestly, this is the most important step, and it's one that will really determine your success.
Better to have a vacant property than the wrong tenant. Anyways, thank you for joining us. Again, subscribe, like, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, MySpace, right? Definitely MySpace.
Friendster, definitely.
Friendster, please. Napster, all of them, please. And we thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.